Good afternoon, everybody. Today I am going to be talking about my top 25 books of 2025. So I did not plan a specific TBR for this year, so what I decided to do for this video instead was just go through all of the books I read throughout the year that were 4 and 5 star ratings and just compile my list that way. Some of the books I'm going to be talking about are books that I borrowed from the library. The books I have physical, I have right here in front of me, and there are also a couple of audio books that I listen to that I'm going to mention. The first book I wanted to talk about is Just Kids by Patti Smith. I read this in April for my for Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR. This is a memoir of a person who was a rock and roll singer in the 1970s. So if you're looking for a book to pair this up with, I would recommend you should read it with Daisy Jones and the Six. And I really loved, I was not familiar with Patti Smith when I picked up her book. I heard about this book through a video that Taylor at Diaries of Creativity posted earlier this year, where she compiled a list of about 7 or 8 books that she thinks Rory Gilmore would read if Gilmore Girls was on in the present day. And I don't think that Rory would necessarily read this, but I think that Lane probably would, because she's a musician. Number 2 on this list is If It Makes You Happy by Julie Olivia. This was one of my favorite new releases from September. This is a romance set in the 1990s, 1997 to be exact. So when this book was set, I was about 11 or 12. This takes place in the fictional town of Copper Run, Vermont, which is a small town that is similar to Stars Hollow and Gilmore Girls. And it focuses around Michelle, who is the main female lead in this book. Who does she not look like Lauren Graham? Like, seriously, I think the cover artist of this book really got the aesthetic down of the small town and the kinds of clothes that a character similar to Lorelai would wear. So in this relationship dynamic in this book, it's interesting because it's Grumpy Sunshine reversed. Luke's character, who is this main character, his name is Cliff. He's a baker at the local inn that Michelle's mother used to own, who has 2 daughters. One daughter who's 16, her name is Shelley, and one daughter who's 8, and her name is Becky. And I love Michelle's dynamic with the younger daughter. I think it's really adorable. They also have a dog called Rocket, who reminds me of Paul Anka, who is the dog that Lorelai adopts while Rory is at college. So if you are looking for a fall romance book, please pick this one up. It was a 4.5 star rate for me, but I'm just going to boost that up to 5 just because of the aesthetics and how much I enjoyed reading the growing romance between Cliff and Michelle. The next book that I read that is on my top 25 list of books I read in 2025 is Margot's Got Money Troubles. I read this book in January for the book club that I used to be in at Print Book. I'm still in. I'm taking a break right now from it and rejoining them in January. The book club that I read this book for is called Books and Brews, and it's run by Rachel Conrad. So I read this book in January for book club, and it's about a girl named Margot who's 19. She has an affair with her college professor and gets kicked out of college and has to raise the baby on her own. So the dynamic between Margot and her teacher obviously reminds me of Ross and Elizabeth on Friends when they date in season 6, though they never go as far as having a kid. But trust me, I have written an alternate relationship fan fiction based on that kind of plot. So Margot joins OnlyFans to make YouTube videos to like make money to support her child. So that's how I was able to relate to her because of being on social media. This was my first book by this author, Rufi Thorpe. She also wrote The Knockout Queen, which I still need to read. I gave this book 4 stars. Coming in at number 4 is a poetry collection I recently reviewed in one of my reading progress videos, which I will link in the description. It's called Pansy by Andrea Gibson. I read this. This was the December book club pick for Reading the Rainbow Book Club at Print Bookstore, which I loved. I gave this book 5 stars, and as I said in the review in my reading progress video, I loved learning about this this writer through her poetry. The next book I wanted to talk about is Grace and Henry's Holiday Movie Marathon by Matthew Norman. This is a new holiday release that came out on October 23rd. Matthew Norman is another new author for me this year, along with Julie Olivia and Rufi Thorpe. Grace and Henry's Holiday Movie Marathon focuses on 2 recent widowers who join together in their grief to get together to watch holiday movies once a week. And this is the perfect book to read, especially if you love holiday movies, because I bet everybody can find a favorite holiday movie that is mentioned in this book. Some of them include National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Elf, A Charlie Brown Christmas, and Love Actually. So please, if you are a fan of any of these Christmas movies, please read this book. I gave it 5 stars. The next book is a short story I read during Halloween. Not a short story, a novella that was recommended to me by Gabby over at Gabby Reads. And she mentioned this in her Halloween novellas video that she made at the beginning part of October. If I can find that video, I will link it in the description box. This book is about a bunch of shape-shifting aliens who come to Earth and turn into the humans that they encounter, that they eat. So it was a very interesting plot dynamic that I enjoyed reading, and I am going to probably write a short story inspired by that type of thing at some point. The next book that I recently reread was a 5-star read from the springtime, which is called Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This is a horror book that focuses on Mallory, who is just getting out of rehab, and she gets hired as a nanny for a 5-year-old little boy named Teddy, who draws interesting pieces of artwork of things he sees in his closet or monsters he pictures in his nightmares. So this book is cool because it comes with illustrations, and I have reviewed this book in 2 other videos and showed the illustrations in those videos. So Hidden Pictures was recommended to me by my former hairdresser at Bang Cut and Color, Andrea, when I was asking her for recommendations for my Friends in Gilmore Girls TBR. She recommended me this video to pair up with the movie The Sixth Sense, with which Bruce Willis starred in. And Bruce Willis, for those of you who don't know, was on Friends because he lost a bet with Matthew Perry during the whole 9 yards. And he appeared in the 3-episode arc where Ross dates his college student, Elizabeth, and he plays Elizabeth's dad. And he is the person that saves that whole entire plot arc from being completely boring. So I give him credit for that. I love watching his scenes, especially when he's dating Rachel. That whole situation when they are both at the beach house or the lake house, or it's lake house or cabin, I don't know. But it's a family house that the grandmother of Elizabeth owns. So Ross and Elizabeth go there for the weekend, and then Rachel and Paul, who is Bruce Willis's character, arrive 5 minutes after they do. And there is this scene where Paul is hyping himself up to make love to Rachel, and he's like, I'm just a love machine. I love that scene. It's so funny. So Hidden Pictures got 4.5 stars, and the one where Paul's the man is 8.5 out of 10 stars on IMDb. So Bruce Willis's family will never see this video, but in case they come across it, I'm sure they will appreciate how highly I rank the one where Paul's the man. And also, The Sixth Sense is one of my favorite thriller movies, for those who are interested in knowing that piece of information. Number 8 on the list is What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. Kate Alice Marshall is a new thriller author that it was introduced to me this year, I think through I can't remember which booktuber recommended her to me. I think maybe it might have been Jordaline or Gabby, but I can't remember for sure. So, What Lies in the Woods is a thriller that is set at a cabin in the woods, and it's a murder mystery. Kate Alice Marshall was a new thriller author for me this year, and I have read 4 books of hers, and she's coming out with a new thriller book in May, which I will link the description from the Pastel Bookshelves channel in the description where her new thriller book is mentioned. I have also read A Killing Cold and Rules for Vanishing. Rules for Vanishing is good to read if you're a fan of the show Stranger Things, because the characters in that book are very similar to the characters on Stranger Things. The next book is a book that I mentioned in my top nonfiction books for the Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR wrap-up. It is Mean Baby by Selma Blair. Selma Blair is more well known for her characters on Dawson's Creek and playing Vivian Kensington in the movie Legally Blonde with Reese Witherspoon, and she talks about her experiences and how close she got to Reese Witherspoon during the making of Legally Blonde in this book. And she is also a disability rights activist because she has multiple sclerosis, which is a muscle condition, which another actor from Friends, Christina Applegate, also has. So I really liked learning about how she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and all of the advocacy she does for the disease. So this book with memoirs, it's hard to give them a rating, but if I could give this one a rating, it would be 5 stars because obviously, as I just was saying, I connect to Selma Blair's character. I connect to Selma Blair because she is a disability rights activist. The next book that I have on my list at number 10 is One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle. This is a magical realism book about a little girl, about a 30-year-old woman who loses her mother to cancer, and before the mother passes away, they were supposed to go on a vacation to Italy. So the main character, her name is Katie. She goes on a trip solo and experiences all the experiences her and her mom were supposed to experience together. And the hotel in this book is actually a real place in Italy, which I would like to go to someday. It is called the Poseidon Hotel on the Amalfi Coast. And Rebecca Searle really drags you in with the scenery of the little towns in the Amalfi Coast that Katie goes exploring in. And this audiobook was narrated by Lauren Graham from Gilmore Girls. So I highly recommend doing a immersive experience while reading the physical book and listening to the audio, so you can hear Lauren Graham talk to you about the places that Katie travels to. 5 stars. Coming in at number 11 is Sacred Hearts. I borrowed this book from my mother-in-law, Sally. This is by the same author as The Birth of Venus. Actually, this is the 3rd book in the trilogy with The Birth of Venus and the Company of the Courtesan. And I really enjoy this series because it's a series that focuses on Renaissance artists and how they got inspired for their artwork. So this was a 4.5-star trilogy for me. I will read you what this book is about. The year is 1570, and a new novice has just been forced into the Italian convent of Santa Caterina. Ripped by her family from the man she loves, 16-year-old Serafina is sharp and defiant. Her first night inside the walls are spent in an incandescent rage so violent that the dispensary mistress, Soroya Zuana, is dispatched to the girl's cell to sedate her. Thus begins a complex relationship of trust and betrayal. As Serafina rails against her incarceration, disorder and rebellion mount inside the convent, which, while beyond its walls, dictates the Counter-Reformation, begin to impose a regime of oppression that threatens what little freedom the nuns have enjoyed. Acclaimed author Sarah Dunant brings the intricate Renaissance world compellingly to life in its rich, engrossing, multifaceted love story encompassing the passions of the flesh and the exaltation of the spirit and the deep, enduring power of friendship. This book reminds me of Maria in The Sound of Music, if she was a little bit more like reactionary to like being against what the nuns wanted her to do, if she didn't end up working for the Von Trapps. As I just said, I gave this whole trilogy 4.5 stars, but this book was, I gave this book on its own 5 stars just because of the, how interesting the story tells about living in a covenant, a convent, not a covenant. Coming in at number 12 on my list is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. This is the sequel to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and it was released at the beginning of June. I was able to connect to the niece of the librarian in this book because she has a disability that's similar to me on the autism spectrum. But this book focuses on Sarah, who is a witch who takes over her great aunt's inn and has to rebuild the clientele from scratch. She has a pet fox, which is on the cover right here, and his name is I can't find the name of the fox. Anyway, so Sarah meets Luke Larson, who is the librarian, and their dynamic is extremely similar to Lorelai and Luke, or Lorelai and Michelle, because Michelle and Luke are both really grumpy characters, and Lorelai is the sunshine. So I gave this book 5 stars. I love how there's disability representation in this book with Luke's niece, Poppy. And I just love the dynamic between Sarah and Luke and how their relationship builds, similar to how Luke and Lorelai's relationship develops in Gilmore Girls. Currently, I am at the beginning of season 4, and at this point, Luke and Lorelai are not together yet. Luke has just gotten divorced from Nicole, I'm pretty sure. I think he's in the midst of that, and then Lorelai, I believe, is going to be starting to date Jason soon. So I can't wait to see how their dynamic works out. So there is a question in here in a discussion question section that connects to the Wizard of Oz that I figured I would talk about. Luke's peers called him the Tin Man when he was younger, a Wizard of Oz reference that has stuck with him since then. Why do you think he continues to identify with this character? I think he continues to identify with the Tin Man character because for those of you who have seen the Wicked movie, the character of Bach is the Tin Man, and he is in a relationship with Elphaba's sister, Nessa Rose, who by this point is the governor of Munchkinland. And he realizes he has unrequited feelings for Glinda, who is about to get married to Fiyero. And that's when the spell is cast on him to turn him into the Tin Man. And basically, his heart is taken away. And that, I think, why Luke's character is connected to the Tin Man is because when, in The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy and the Scarecrow meet the Tin Man for the first time, he's really bitter because he doesn't have a heart. And I'm not saying that Luke is a heartless person, but he's very grumpy and he's very hard to get along with. And Sarah has a hard time initially getting along with him, but then once they become closer friends, she's able to break him out of his shell a little bit. And then my favorite secondary character in this book is probably Luke's niece, Poppy, because as I just said, I connect to her because she has a similar disability than me. And also, I think the animal companion character is really cute, the little fox. He reminds me of the villain in Dora the Explorer, though I think he's probably a less evil fox than Swiper. The next book on my list is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was her new release from June, and it is set in the 1980s during the beginning of the space program. It focuses on Joan, who develops romantic feelings for somebody she works with at the space program. And I also love her dynamic with her niece Frances. I think their aunt and niece relationship is very sweet. I gave this book 4.5 stars. There hasn't, I think, most of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books have gotten between 4 and 5 stars for me. I don't really think there's a book of hers that I haven't liked. But I really learned a lot about the space program. And when I was growing up. When I was 1 year old, that's when the Challenger explosion happened. I don't remember much about it, but when I was a little bit older, I remember watching the episode of Punky Brewster where Punky wants to become an astronaut, and then the Challenger explosion happens, and she decides not to become an astronaut because she doesn't want to die in an explosion. So I really want to watch that episode again and compare it to this book. That's on my bucket list for next year. The next book is Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall. This was one of my first 5-star reads. This was my second 5-star read for the year after I read Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This is a romance / thriller book that focuses on, it's set in England, and it's focused on Beth, who is married to her husband, Frank, and she then reconnects with her childhood lover, Gabriel, and there's a love triangle between the two of them that's very tenuous. And then Frank's brother, Jimmy, accidentally kills Gabriel's son's dog, and there's a whole trial based on the killing of the dog, which is that's the meat and potatoes of most of this book, is Beth dealing with, Frank is on trial for murdering or threatening to murder Gabriel because he's married, he's angry about the infidelity. And like, this audiobook is also really well narrated. I first listened to this on audio, and then I ordered the physical book with money I got for my birthday. And yeah, this book was a 5-star read, and I highly recommend it to you if you haven't already read it. The next book is one I do not have physically, but one I most recently read. I read this book about 3 weeks ago, Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, which is her latest dark academia release that came out in October. She also wrote Yellowface, which I reread after reading it originally and not really getting into it. I really liked Catabasis much better than Yellowface. I really liked how this book references Dante's Inferno with the journey to hell and the relationship dynamic and build up between Alice and Peter. R.F. Kuang dedicates this book to her husband, and I think this relationship between Alice and Peter is sort of meant to mirror her relationship with her husband, which is also very sweet. And this also has disability representation in it, because Peter has Crohn's disease, and I don't know much about this disease, so I learned a lot about it through Peter's character, and that's why I gave this book 5 stars. I mean, the book was well written. In this book, her professor died. She's in college writing her dissertation in graduate school at Yale University. Her professor, who is teaching the class that she's writing the dissertation for, dies, and she has to go to hell to get the teacher to write her a letter of recommendation for a job. So I just loved everything about this book, and if you haven't read Catabasis yet, you need to pick it up from the library ASAP. The next book on my list is The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. I just love Ocean Vuong's writing. It's so lyrical, and it really sucks you in right away. The other book that I read by him earlier this year, which encouraged me to pick up this one, was called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which was recommended to me by Jack Edwards from Jack in the Books. And this was his new release. This was Ocean Vuong's new release from April, I think. And yeah, much like On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, the writing in this book is very lyrical, and I will read you what it is about. One late summer evening in the post-industrial town of East Gladness, Connecticut, 19-year-old Hay stands on the edge of a bridge in pelting rain, ready to jump, when he hears someone shout across the river. The voice belongs to Granzina, an elderly widow succumbing to dementia, who convinces him to take another path. Bereft and out of options, he quickly becomes her caretaker. Over the course of the year, the unlikely pair develops a life-altering bond, and one built on empathy, spiritual awakening, and heartbreak. And with the power to transform Hai's relationship to himself, his family, and a community on the brink. Following the cycles of history, memory, and time, the Emperor of Gladness shows the profound ways in which love, labor, and loneliness form the bedrock of American life. At its heart, in a brave epic about what it means to exist on the fringes of society and to reckon the wounds that haunt our collective soul, hallmarks of Ocean Vuong's writing, formal innovation, syntactic dexterity, and the ability to twin grit with grace through tenderness are full of display in the Brighton story of chosen family, unexpected friendship, and how far we would go to possess one of life's most fleeting mercies, a second chance. So the beginning of this book reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life, where George is about to jump off the bridge and Clarence saves him. So I think the senior citizen person in this book who becomes Hai's friend. Oh, I just said her name. What was it? Granzina. I think Granzina is definitely the Clarence of this book, and I really love the dynamic that she builds up with Hai throughout the story. The next book on my list, The next book that I have on my list is Heart the Lover by Lily King. I had the pleasure of meeting Lily King in September, where she signed this book at Mechanics Hall in Portland. And I really enjoyed learning about what went into the backstory of this book. This book is a companion novel to her release from 2020, Writers and Lovers. And what the best way to read both of these books together is start Writers and Lovers and this book at the same time. Then pause this book, finish Writers and Lovers, and go back to part 2 of this book, because Writers and Lovers in this book are essentially about the same main character who is named Jordan, and Writers and Lovers in this book interconnect in the beginning part where Jordan is at college, and then pause this book, finish Writers and Lovers, and then the rest of this book takes place at the end of Writers and Lovers, when Jordan is out of college and reconnecting with the two main guys in this book, who are named Sam and Yash. And I really liked her dynamic with Sam and Yash, and how the connection builds once she reconnects with Yash in the second half of the book. And I don't want to issue spoilers, but this book was a 4.5-star read for me. The next book I have, which I forgot to grab, is on the bookshelf in the other room, is Elizabeth of East Hampton by Audrey Bellezza and Emily Harding. This is the second book in this series with Emma of 83rd Street, which is modern retellings of Jane Austen's books set in present day. Emma of 83rd Street is obviously inspired by Emma. Elizabeth of East Hampton is inspired by Pride and Prejudice, and I think the recent release that they came out with a couple of weeks ago, which is a Christmas book called Anne of Avenue A, I think that might be inspired by Persuasion, maybe, but I can't be too sure. So this book takes place in the Hamptons of New York during the summertime, and it's a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth Bennet's mom runs a multi-level marketing business about selling leggings, and she's trying to get Elizabeth and her sisters to join the family business, but Elizabeth wants nothing to do with that. She wants to go to Columbia University to study journalism. So she is very similar to Rory because she's a journalist. And then the main crux of the plot of the relationship dynamic of this book, Lizzie's love triangle in this book is between Will, who is supposed to be Mr. Darcy, and Tristan, who is supposed to be Billingsley. And Tristan is the guy who runs the music festival, and he reminds me of Jake's character in Freaky Friday because he is a musician who plays the guitar, and he also reminds me of Tristan in Gilmore Girls because obviously his name is Tristan, and he has a similar personality to Tristan where he kind of gets in trouble a lot. If you want to read this book, I don't want to spoil what happens in it, but this book is best to be read during the summer because it's set on the beach during Memorial Day weekend. So if you're looking for a good time to read this book, read it during Memorial Day weekend or the beginning of June. The next book coming in at number 19 is one I do not have a physical copy of. I also listened to this book on audio. It's called Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This book focuses on Bo and Win, who are both characters who have limb differences. And as I have said in previous reviews of Out on a Limb, I was able to connect to Win's character because she talks about the issues that she has with dexterity. And while I do not have a limb difference, I have similar dexterity issues that she discusses because of my cerebral palsy. And I just love how Hannah Bonham Young writes her characters with disabilities. In this book, she does a great job of doing limb differences. And in her September release, People Watching, which I didn't like quite as much as Out on a Limb, it focuses on the main female character caring for her mom with Alzheimer's. And in her author's notes, Hannah Bonham Young has mentioned that she wrote the character a Win based on herself because she has similar limb differences, and she based the plot of People Watching for Prue's backstory on her grandmother dying of Alzheimer's. So I love that I can connect to her stories in that way because as I have mentioned before, I have lost both of my grandmothers to Alzheimer's/dementia, and that's why I can connect to Prue and People Watching and Samantha and Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. We're getting to the end, folks. The next book on my list is Harriet Tubman Live in Concert by Bob the Drag Queen. This is one of the books that I read for the Reading the Rainbow Book Club earlier this year at Print Bookstore. It is written by Bob the Drag Queen from RuPaul's Drag Race, and I have never seen any episodes of RuPaul's Drag Race, so I'm not even familiar with this guy who wrote this book. It's his debut novel, and I think he did a really great job with it. I gave it 4.5 stars. Basically, it's reimagining Harriet Tubman, who was a slave, as a musician, and her putting together a stage show based on her experience on the Underground Railroad. I loved it. So, if you have never read this book, I highly recommend that you check it out from your local library. I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book is a poetry collection that I read in February for the Books and Brews book club through Print Bookstore that's run by Rachel Conrad. This is called Helen of Troy, 1993, and it is a modern interpretation of Helen, who fought the Battle of Troy in ancient Rome. And the one poem I really liked in this book is on page... Hang on, where did it go? Helen of Troy in February. And the line that sticks out to me the most in this poem is, "What did you do today, Helen?" He says, "What did you do to me? What did you do today, Helen?" And listens. I mean, really listens. When I say, "Well, I changed the baby and took the car through the wash," and those words straight and tidy, little soldiers on the march. My mouth to that baking marsh of his insides, where cooked things lie down and begin to sink. I gave him arrows, my lover, hearts and kisses, silk petals in the centerfold, $1.99. So basically what she's describing in that poem is getting a Valentine's Day card for her boyfriend, and I really love how this poet's name is Maria Zoccola, and I just love how she paints the imagery of the Valentine's Day card that this girl is buying for her, that Helen of Troy is buying for her boyfriend. We're getting to the end. Number 23 is Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham. This is Lauren Graham's memoir about her experiences filming Gilmore Girls, Parenthood, and Gilmore Girls, A Year in the Life. And I just started watching Gilmore Girls in 2023 with my neighbor Kathleen, who lives next door to me. Right now we are at the very beginning of season 4, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Lorelai starting to date Jason. And my favorite characters on Gilmore Girls are Kirk, Suki, Max Medina, Madeline, Paris's friend, and Lorelai. So the thing that stood out to me in this memoir was when she talks about filming Gilmore Girls and all the costumes and what her favorite costumes are. And if I could have the fashion of any TV character in my closet, it would be Lorelai, Rachel Green, and Janice from Friends. So I need to start getting on that. The second to last book in this list is one I do not own physically. It is called Everyone in This Room Will One Day Be Dead by Emily R. Austin. This is by the same author who wrote Interesting Facts About Space and We Could Be Rats. This book focuses on a girl who works at a church, and she is not religious. So this book mostly talks about like her religion and how she's kind of a depressed and sheltered girl, and her struggling relationship with her family. I love Emily R. Austin's writing and how she infuses so much energy into her characters. This character's name in this book, her name is Gilda, and I really thought she was funny. And Emily R. Austin is coming out with a new book in a couple of weeks on January 10th or January 13th. I can't remember the exact date. It is called Is This a Cry for Help? And this is a book about libraries. So I'm very excited about reading this book and seeing how she interprets what's going on in the present day with libraries and how the funding is getting cut because of the Trump administration. So I'm excited for the release of that book. And finally, number 25 of 25 books I read in 2025 is Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston. This book focuses on Joni, who is a musician who is struggling to write music, and she gets called back from her tour to go to her family's concert venue to like revive it because it's about to shut down. And she meets she meets a guy named Sebastian, who is a musician, and they keep hearing this same lyric going round and round in their head. So they end up writing a song together to help save the music venue. So this book is beautiful. This is probably one of my favorite book of Ashley Poston's because it's another book that talks about dementia. So I really hit it out of the park this year with picking books about focusing around people who have family members with dementia. This is the third book I read on that topic, and that's why I connect to these characters so easily. As I said when I was talking about Say You'll Remember Me and People Watching. So to answer a discussion question, there is a wide array of music mentioned in Sounds Like Love. What do you think makes a song memorable? Alternatively, what's the worst song you've ever heard? Oh boy. This is a tough question because I have a lot of favorite songs. But one song that I have always liked that has stood out to me that always makes me cry is this Christmas song that's on the radio every year. I think it's by Luther Vandross. It's a song about red shoes and about a family member dying in a hospital or something, and like that brings tears to my eyes. My other favorite song that always really stood out to me is A Bushel and a Peck from the musical Guys and Dolls, because when I was little, my grandma used to sing that to me all the time. So this book was selected for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR because Joni reminds me of either Phoebe or Lane. So what were your, did you share any favorite books to me? What were some of your favorite books? Let's discuss them in the comments, and I will be back soon with my 26 books I want to read in 2026, which I will be combining the TBR list for that video and my holiday book haul in case I get books for Christmas that are on the 26 books that I want to read in 2026. So I will see you guys next Friday. Have a good weekend and a great Christmas.